Welcome, I'm Steward Godwin Jornsen, and it's a great moment sharing with you again. Now, during the Ask a Question series, I put out a text of scripture, which is Proverbs chapter 31. It says that many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. And I asked people to ask relationship-based questions, and some questions were sent in, and I'm going to be taking those questions one after the other. Today, I want to take a question from our sister Osando, and she asked a very striking question. And here's what she asked me on WhatsApp. She says that the text of scripture, Proverbs 31, in particular, it's more of a hand-working industrious woman. And her question is the life of a woman all about labor? Now, that's a very important question, because in some of our contemporary society, it seems like that is the case. First and first, to answer this question, I want to deal with the word all. I don't think the life of anyone is all about labor, whether male or female, man or woman, boy, girl, grown-up, adult, parents, children. Nobody's life should be all about labor. If anybody's life is absolutely all about labor, this is more like slavery to me. So I'm very concerned, first of all, about the word all about labor. The woman's life is not all about labor. A cow's life is nearly all about labor, because one of the things I know about oxen and cows is that they are compelled to do the wheels of their master. These cows and oxen, or these oxen, is also put in fields and they plow for humans. And when they are done plowing for humans, at a certain point, they become beef and meats, and that's it. Their dongs are used as manures to grow food for humans. So you don't see cows having fun, having leisure, having pleasure, having a time of their own, being led to be what they should be. Really difficult to really see that happening. Vast majority of the time, or say especially in certain areas, these cows are practically working for their masters. That you can say the life of a cow is all about labor. But for the life of a human, you really wouldn't say that a human's life or a woman's life or a man's life is all about labor, unless you're referring to a slave. Again, there's something very peculiar about a woman. The woman's body, from the moment the girl child begins to grow, tends to be pointing to so much responsibility. See, the man is one just straight figure. I see a boy, a man, one straight figure, maintains that look and shape almost throughout, and he grows up, and that's how that young man likely. But that's not the case with the lady. As the body begins to, the lady is growing, all of a sudden you start seeing this menstrual cycle, right, that comes in, and she's going through pains. You see, I don't think men go through as much pains in their developing process like women do. I think women go through a lot more painful process. And so they learn very early to handle pain. An average young man begins to learn how to handle pain when he's probably on his own, packed in his house, going to his house, maybe going to a place of work. But for the woman, with her body, she already begins to learn how to handle pain. Psychologically, she is fine-tuned to handle that. She is molded in a way that she can handle those kinds of challenges, manage those kinds of situations. The man, look at his body system. He is not given that much study process, managing pain, managing body process. No, he gets up, he throws his clothes up on his body, he walks right out, he comes back. He's growing right about the same way, without any peculiarity and without pointers to responsibility. His body does not necessarily point him more to responsibility. Maybe apart from puberty and the rest, doesn't really point him to responsibility. But look at the young girl. They begin to develop, their breast begins to develop. What does that point to? It begins to point to many other factors and the rest. This lady is going to grow up and start breastfeeding. It's already, when people see that girl is growing, there's a pointer to a responsibility right there, directly or indirectly, accepted or not accepted. There's already a pointer to a responsibility right there. Then she continues to grow. Then she gets married. Then her womb is ready. A womb also is another pointer to another responsibility. She's going to be the one to carry the baby for 9 months, and by the time the baby is born, she's going to be the one that is going to start breastfeeding the baby. She's going to be the one caring for the baby directly, the hugs, the holds, most of the time. It creates this mental consciousness, this consciousness that yes, the woman is wired up for that. And when it's time to deliver, they said the woman is in labor. And really, if you look at the life of a man, you wouldn't see almost all of these things which I'm talking about. You would hardly even see them. You will hardly even notice them. So from top to bottom, the woman's body is actually always pointing her to there are responsibilities here, there's a task here, your body is matured for this, it's getting ready for that, and it's that way. So generally it is easy to believe or to come to that conclusion that the lady is wired for more work, wired for more labor than that. But we should not think that Proverbs 31 just exclusively says that the woman's responsibility is to labor. Now, there is something about Proverbs 31 that is a bit awkward. I was discussing that with my kids. I said Proverbs 31 talked a lot about the woman. But guess what he was talking about the man? The man is going to be praised at the gate. What's he doing at the gate? Is he like a security guy, or is there playing draft with a couple of his friends and having fun? But what about that might be? We cannot remove the fact that the Proverbs 31 was talking about a woman that was virtuous, and now we want to look at virtue a little more, so I can explain a few things about virtue there as an answer to your question. Haven't explained what I have explained before. Virtue is more like a spirit possessed that every believer, every true Christian possesses. I start with Jesus. A woman with the issue of blood touched Jesus. Jesus said, "Virtue has gone out of me." You see, virtue is an internal driving force. It's a power. It's a motivator. It gives you direction and purpose. Virtue is that spirit inside of you that works, pushes you to work. When virtue flowed out of Jesus into the woman with the issue of blood, Jesus said, "Virtue has gone out of me." That virtue went into the woman's body to do work, and that work was stop her ailing and her disease, stop the disease that has vexed her for the number of years. That's what that virtue went to do. And the virtue flowed from Jesus, who was a worker. For as long as Jesus has this virtue in him, he's always working. He's always doing something, healing the sick, ministering to people. Now that virtue is what flowed into the woman to do work in the woman. An average Christian lady, an average woman, a believer, a true believer, a child of God, man, woman, we have and possess this virtue within us. And this virtue that we possess within us enables us to do a lot of things, great things, outstanding things. Now, this is how this virtue works. First thing that it does is that it wires up from our thinking system, our thoughts. We begin to think virtuously. And because the virtuous woman, a Christian woman, is thinking virtuously, thinking industriously, productively, creatively, that thought system begins to control everything about the woman. The woman is not virtuous because she is subjected to the labor. The woman is industrious and virtuous because she is internally programmed by a spirit of creativity and productivity. She cannot, by her making and by her design, be in an atmosphere that does not produce results. She cannot be in a place that is not effective and efficient. She cannot be there and people are starving. She cannot. The wiring system that processes the thought within a virtuous woman tells her, teaches her, prompts her to act in these peculiar situations so people don't starve around her, people don't get sick around her, people don't die around her, whether or not her husband is in the picture. To get the point of Proverbs 31, this Proverbs 31 woman does all the things that she does because of an internal virtue that she possesses, an energy to work. It wires up her psychology. It prepares her. It gives her a sense of responsibility. She takes this responsibility on herself, not because she's told she must do this, but because she finds it necessary to do this because there are certain things she needs to solve, certain actions she needs to carry out. Now, when a person is virtuous inside, and the person's thinking is producing all that creative and productive thought flow, It affects how the person talks. So you see that a virtuous woman will communicate efficiently and effectively. A virtuous woman will communicate in such a way that will be very productive. There will be respect and value because she has a virtue inside of her. It's an inner energy that drives you, helps you know what you ought to do, how you ought to do it, and where you ought to do it, and why you should do it. So at this point in time, you're not waiting for somebody to motivate you to do what you have to do. You're internally motivated. That's why the virtuous woman can wake up and rise early in the morning, not because anybody taps her up to get up, but because she is internally motivated and she's internally driven. This is not to say that the woman's life is absolutely about labor. This is to say that she is virtuous and what's inside her is responsible for all the actions that you see painted in Proverbs 31. And that's why this issue of virtue is not cross-platform to the whole woman. You can't get every woman to be virtuous. If that's possible, then the scripture wouldn't say who can find a virtuous woman. It means that a virtuous woman is scarce. Virtue is not a generically, naturally possessed characteristics, because it wires up your thought system, then it affects your talk, then after it affects your talk, it begins to affect your attitude. Virtue begins to affect your attitude, influence the woman's overall behavior, how she behaves, how she acts, how she does the things that she does with people. So you see that her behavior makes her husband to be praised in the city. Her character, the way she handles things, the way she manifests her attitude. Now again, it is not a generic feminine quality. And neither is it a demand that all ladies be virtuous. Even men are virtuous, right? Even men can be virtuous. Women can be virtuous. The Proverbs 31 is painting a picture of how a virtuous woman acted. That's why it says, who can find a virtuous woman? Her price is far more than rubies. It's not saying that every woman falls into this category, because I can tell you not every woman is virtuous and not every man is virtuous. So Proverbs 31 is telling us what are the manifestation and the characters that manifest from somebody that is virtuous, right? And this virtue is internally driven. You can call that the spirit of virtue. Is internally driven within the person, and the person begins to act and walk in that regard, move in that direction as powered by virtue, because virtue will always get you to do something. So when virtue gets into somebody, it affects the thoughts of the person, it affects the talks of the person, it affects the attitudes of the person, it affects the acts of the person, then it affects the works of the person. So virtue affects your thoughts, your talks, your attitudes, your acts, your works. All of those are affected by virtue. And if you read Proverbs 31, you will see that the Proverbs 31 woman was repeatedly influenced and driven by an internal virtue. So she values a property, she buys it. It's from her inside. Not everybody will have that potential or that capacity. So what I'm saying in essence is, the life of a woman is not all about labor. Our body system is wired in a way that tends to trigger that consciousness that she should be a worker, she should be prepared to work. That's where our body system and our biology tends to point to that. No matter how hard you try to run away from it, your biology points to that. As soon as the child is born, there's breast milk, meaning that that's another pointer to responsibility. You are likely going to be breastfeeding. As she grows, her womb is ready. You're likely going to have to carry a child for 9 months. She can't push and deliver, then the CS is performed. She's cut open and the baby is brought out. She lives through that pain. Almost all through her process of living, her body system tends to point to that direction that she's going to have to walk and endure lots of pains. So when she comes to household management, guess what? The person that tends to absorb a lot of family responsibility becomes the woman. My daughter said, Daddy's job is to bring money. And I said, everybody's job in the house is to bring money. It is everybody's job to bring money, right? You can't say, oh, mommy gives us food, Daddy brings us money. That's what she usually says, you know. So even if the food is coming from the money, she believes mommy brings food, Daddy brings money. You know, that's a child's thinking system. You know, but everybody has core responsibility and everybody can be virtuous. Even a virtuous man is hard to find, because some men have no virtue in them, have no inner driving force for them to work. And that's why they either can't get a job or create a job, make one, or be relevant to themselves or their families, because there are no inner virtues within them. In the scripture, virtue is not only assigned to the ladies. A man can be virtuous, a woman can be virtuous. In fact, every believer is expected to be virtuous, in the sense that you and I, every one of us, are supposed to be internally driven by a success spirit, driven by an excellent spirit. The Bible calls it the spirit of excellence. So you're wired to be productive, you're wired to have results, you're wired to work, you're wired to create, you're wired to be excellent in your doing, you're wired to think differently, you're wired to not be lazy. That's how you're wired, and you can't do anything about that. You can't change or alter it. It's the way you were created, it's the way you were designed. You need to live up to it and accept the reality of that, and know that you can't do without working. So virtue is for every one of us. The lessons in Proverbs 31, I read it every single day, and I tend to apply it also to myself. I don't read Proverbs 31 as an all-human scripture. I read Proverbs 31 to study virtue, to understand virtue, not to conclude on what a woman alone should be doing, but to understand how virtue affects a human, right? Get the difference. Not reading Proverbs 31 to just get our rules and regulations for how a woman should be living, but how humans should be living. So the concept of virtue is for every one of us. Nobody's life is carved out all for labor. We have fun, we have leisure, we play, we can relax, we sleep, we have choices, we can say a yes or a no to a certain set of job, we can get out of a job, we can resign, we can retreat, we can take siesta longer than we want to take, whatever the case may be. None of us are trapped out as slaves, unless you are a slave. But please know, virtue is what we all should possess. If virtue could lead Jesus into someone and do a great work in her life, let us believe that God's virtue that has flowed from Christ to us is in us, so that we too can do great works in our time. I'm Steward Godwin Jornsen, the lead pastor of In His Name Bible Church, and you're free to ask your own questions also, whether it has to do with family affairs, relationship matters, and all, and I will try to give an answer. Now, I have answered this question my own way, and I want you now to start up a discussion and answer the same question your own way. And what do you think about the answer that I gave? Is it good? Is it fair enough? Is it balanced? Is it right? Is it wrong? Whatever your view about my answer is, I want you to comment. I want you to talk about it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Steward Godwin Jornsen. And I'm sure I'm going to keep up with you. In the next section, I'm going to be answering all the questions that were asked alongside by other people too. Stay blessed, and remember, you're bigger, you're better, and you're bolder.